Hi there, folks who are watching online, and welcome to the continuation of our Bible class series on what we're calling the Christophanies, the Old Testament Christophanies, the Old Testament appearances of Jesus Christ. Today we're going to be in Daniel chapter 3. In Daniel chapter 3, this is a familiar story, but we're going to take a very close look at it and see how Jesus Christ himself is present in the midst of this terrifying scene and this terrifying narrative. So let's get started with a word of prayer. God, Heavenly Father, as we find ourselves in the hot seat, in our own fiery furnaces, we pray that you would indeed deliver us, that you would save us, that you would do what you always do and see us through those fiery moments, whatever they may be. Open our eyes to your word and to your grace this day. In Christ's name, amen. All right, we are in Daniel chapter 3. I mentioned fiery furnace, and this is a classic Sunday school story. This is one that your parents probably taught you. This is one that you might know, but we're going to take a good detailed look at it. So Daniel chapter 3, starting with verse 1, we're going to read to through verse 4. Good morning. If you want to come and join us, feel free. Anyway, so we're going to look at verses 1 through 3. Ms. Bonner, would you start us out, verses 1 through 3?
This is King
Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah.
made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and it breathed 6 cubits. He set it up on the plan of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent together the straps, the prefect, and the governor, the counselors, the treasurer, the justice, and the magistrate, and all the officials of the body to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satrap, the prefect, and the governor, the council, the treasurer, the justice, the magistrate, and all the officials of this province together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up.
Thank you very much. We'll pause there. Nebuchadnezzar, it's a tough word, I know. So let's there are a couple of interesting things that pop out immediately in this text. First of all, the Bible is not a humorless book. The Bible sometimes has a sense of humor, and one of the ways that we are seeing humor in this book right now is just the repetition of the king's court. And you're going to see repetition throughout this. So you see repeating the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces. The fact that you are repeating to that detail, it might not strike us as funny, but for the original audience, there would be a degree of humor even in this text. So the Bible can be funny, and Daniel is one of those interesting books. Later on, when Nebuchadnezzar is sort of turned into that beast in the fields, that is meant to be a source of ironic humor. Very interesting thing there. Second thing to point out, and this is more of a salient point, Nebuchadnezzar here is doing what I bet our politicians, Republican or Democrat, would love to do. And that is to build a statue of themselves and have everyone fall down and worship it. Because we've had some very egocentric people in the presidency, haven't we? And certainly here in Chicago, I'm sure that the Daley family would love to have a dynastic statue and worship of them. But still, what we see here in King Nebuchadnezzar is unchecked and unbridled ego, to the point that he wants to be worshipped as a god. This statue here that is built is, it says 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. So the cubit here is about 18 inches or 45 centimeters. So 18 inches, or getting close to a meter there, 45 centimeters. What this means is this statue, get ready for this, 9 feet in diameter, 90 feet, 90 feet tall. This was big. This was really, really, really big. And it's, again, this monument to Nebuchadnezzar's ego here. But you know what they say? The bigger they come, the harder they fall. Nebuchadnezzar's fall would come later, but we're going to see him humiliated here later on. I'm going to read here because we're getting a lot of repetition here, starting at verse 4. And the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, O nations and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace." Therefore, as soon as all the people heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. This was a spectacle. This was, I mean, if you... Ms. Shirley, you're carrying that bag there from the Broadway show of The Lion King. Did you see that on Broadway?
No.
You didn't? Okay. Yeah. Oh, neat. I saw that when I was just a kid in Toronto at a theater there. That's certainly a spectacle of a show. And I know Resurrection has the Theater Guild. And part of what the Theater Guild loves to do is go around and see shows and see these wonderful works of art. You get to a Broadway show, and it is a spectacle. Lights, sound, music, drama, costuming, a feast for the ears and a feast for the eyes. That's what's going on here, except rather than the players performing for the audience and the audience watching the players, to the sound of Broadway-type shows, everyone is falling down and bowing and worshiping this golden, giant, ridiculous statue. We sometimes find it funny, I think, in our modern senses, that people would worship something made of wood or stone or metal. And what's that?
This was happened here. They were worshiping that.
Yeah, not here in America, but yeah, exactly. They're worshiping this image of King Nebuchadnezzar. And we here's the thing: we presume that it was an image of King Nebuchadnezzar. The fact is, we don't know exactly what this image was. It could be the king. It could be the Babylonian deity Bel or the Babylonian deity Marduk. If you ever go to the Oriental Institute in Hyde Park here in Chicago, you can see kind of what this would have looked like, because this whole region, this whole Mesopotamian region is represented well in that museum. But everyone was falling down to worship this image, and Nebuchadnezzar commanded that they would do so. And it was a ridiculous spectacle. Ms. Ferguson, would you please take verses 8 through 12? 8 through 12.
That
Thank you very much. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We know these names. These were men of Israel and of Judah that were cast away and were taken away in captivity from their homeland to exile here in Babylon. These names were given to them by their captors. These were not their original names. In fact, this is something that is a theme in American history, especially with the transatlantic slave trade. One of the things that would be done, as you know, is that people would be stripped of their names and given new names. That was in part to strip them of their identity and of their humanity. That's what happened here. Their names were not originally Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their names were originally Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These names are especially transient because Hananiah and Azariah, they have the name Yahweh, the name of God, in their names. And Mishael has the name Elohim, another name of God, in his name. So they were taken away from their land, put in a new land, in captivity, in bondage and slavery in Babylon, given new names, and forced to do the king's bidding. What would they do? What would they do until that moment when they're forced to worship a false god? Would they acquiesce? Or would they stand firm? At this moment, you can imagine the scene on that plain. Everyone bowing down, everyone face flat on the ground, except for three men. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Standing tall, standing proud, and probably sticking out like a sore thumb. What happens next? Verse 13, I'll read here. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you did not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? It's a challenge, isn't it? This is something that's, I love how this is recorded here, and how the writer of Daniel, and let me check that it is indeed Daniel. This was Daniel who wrote this. Certainly the second part of the book was written by Daniel. The first part, there might be a little bit more dubiousness about the author. But the amazing thing here that is recorded is they record Nebuchadnezzar's challenge. Who is the God that can save you? Yes?
God is in a small g there.
Yeah. No, that's a really great thing you point out. So Nebuchadnezzar did not believe in the true God, did not believe in our God. So when he is saying here, he's not saying who is God, who is Yahweh who can save you. He's saying, is there any God that can save you? So he's not referring to the one true God, but to generic deity and generic God. And the king is a despot. He's a tyrant. He doesn't bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to give them a second chance so that their lives could be spared. He does this really to humiliate them even further, to thumb their nose, to put them in the ground all the more and even more. So what goes on? What happens next? They're given a second chance. Verse 16. Would you please read, Ms. Bonner, verses 16, 17, and 18, please?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, the Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us
Thank you very much. This is what true faith looks like here. They're saying, we're going to answer your question. You ask, who is the God that will deliver us from your hands? We respond, it is our God who will deliver us, but even if he doesn't, we still won't bow down and worship. What an extraordinary, what a bold and audacious faith here. Audacity, I think that's a word, President Obama used it with his book that he wrote, The Audacity of Hope. But I think that word audacity is a wonderful word because it really speaks to the bold faith that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego showed here. Our God will save us, but even if he doesn't, we're not bowing down to worship you. We will not serve your gods or worship that image. Could be you, could be Bel, could be Marduk. We aren't going to do that. In fact, idolatry, this worship of statues, is entirely forbidden in the Jewish religion, entirely. God never presented himself to be worshipped. And this makes the Old Testament and the religion of ancient Israel unique, truly unique among other ancient Near Eastern religions. Before, all the other cultures, they had gods. Many of them had multiple gods, but even the ones with one god, they would always worship that god in terms of statues, in terms of idols. Not the case here. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, although they had been carried away, although their names have been changed, although they have been put into slavery and forced labor, they would not give on this point. What happens next? Ms. Ferguson, would you please read verse 19 through 23? Oh, real quick. Yes, Miss Shirley, I'm sorry. Oh, would you like to read? You said in the previous session that you didn't want to read, so that, okay. There, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Yeah. It is absolutely your turn. Verses 19 through 23, please.
Okay, let's see this. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expressions of his face was changed against Shadrach, and Abednego.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Meshach and Abednego. Yeah.
He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to blind the 3 men and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king order was urgent, and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who stood up, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down into the burning fiery furnace.
Thank you very much. Oh, what we have here. Take a look closely at verse 19. Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is an interesting little detail that we have here in the text. Before, he had sort of this, he was angry, he was filled with furious rage, but he had sort of this sneering, mocking contempt. I'm the king, I'm the big one, you'll do what I say. No more of that. Filled with fury. His expression changed into murderous, homicidal rage. He ordered the furnace be heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. This is hot. So hot. Look at the detail here. Verse 22. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed the men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The people who threw him in the furnace were scalded to death. You can imagine that the minute Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego hit that flame, it's all over. It's done.
Scare tactics to make people bow down to him.
Well, exactly. And that is what dictators and despots do. If you look at the rise of Hitler, certainly in Nazi Germany, of course, his chief intent was to exterminate the Jews and Gypsies and pretty much all other non-Aryans, as he defined it. If you look at Stalin, he had these various red purges where even if you were communist and a Soviet in Russia, you would still potentially be done for because he wanted to encourage fear and obedience to him. That still happens in the modern world. North Korea, especially the Kim family, if you try to escape and if you succeed, your family will be thrown into prison for 3 generations, all in an attempt to try and enforce obedience there. That is what tyrants do. That is what despots do. And you know something? This is the amazing thing. Obviously, what Nebuchadnezzar is doing here is an evil act. But I bet that the people in the kingdom, the people witnessing this, were clapping and cheering and applauding. That's what groupthink does. When you get along with the group, even what is heinous can seem normal. Even what is evil can seem virtuous. And so, I imagine, to thunderous applause, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were sent to their deaths in a furnace so hot that if you were even standing near it, you'd die.
The king ordered them to do that, huh?
The king did, yeah. The king probably didn't expect that his servants would die, but that was a byproduct of how hot the furnace rose. Yeah.
Okay, did he have any certain religion that he called himself, like
Sure.
Jew?
Yeah.
What was he?
We don't know what they would have been called. So, like, we know the term Christian, we know the term Jew, we know the term Muslim. He was likely a worshiper of, almost certainly a worshiper of the god Bel, and of the god, quite possibly the god Marduk. These were 2 ancient Babylonian and ancient Mesopotamian deities. He did not believe in the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He was not a worshiper of Yahweh, which is the name of our God. Yeah, exactly. So he worshipped a God, and of course his biggest God was himself, because he was the king after all. And indeed, in the ancient world, the offices of king and priest were often merged. So when you had the king, you would also have the priest, who was the one who had sole access to God. So that's kind of what's going on here. Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, by the way, just thrown in the furnace, they are almost certainly toast. Literally. They are toasty right now. So we'll pick up here. Ms. Ferguson, would you please take 24 and 25?
The king let us be reason and astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the appearance of the 4 is like the son of the gods."
Thank you very much. This is cool here. And this is why we are including this text in our study of this here. As Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into hell, there's someone there with them. Nebuchadnezzar is viewing this. He's probably getting sick, perverse pleasure out of the death of 3 people that would not acquiesce to his will. The only 3 people, by the way, who would not do what he wanted. Astonished and rose up in haste. Declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." They're like, "Yeah, we cast 3 men in. What are you talking about? By now, they're probably burned to a crisp. You can't even see them." "I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." 4 men in the furnace. 1 looks like something beyond that which is human. And none of them are even singed. None of them are hurt. They are all safe. This is where the rubber hits the road. So the question here in verse 25, what does this mean? What does this mean that we see the son of the gods? Nebuchadnezzar clearly recognized, I'm looking at the note here. Nebuchadnezzar clearly recognized but did not describe some feature that set this 4th person apart. Something set Nebuchadnezzar apart here something can set this man apart from the others. We don't know what that is. Was he glowing? Was he wearing white robes? What was this? We don't know. But something here caught Nebuchadnezzar's eye that he's like, this guy isn't like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There's something different here. The wording here, like a son of the gods, I think is very, very deliberate. Nebuchadnezzar used it, but obviously there were things that Nebuchadnezzar was saying here in the midst of this that wasn't recorded, that wasn't written down. But the author here chose to take note of what Nebuchadnezzar said here, son of the gods, and that is why I firmly believe this is another Christophany. This is another Old Testament appearance of Jesus Christ, of Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, before he was incarnate. And you have to remember what our criterion are for this. The first criterion is that this isn't so much an angel, this is a man. The second criterion is that this man is here for the salvation of the people around him. And so when we have this, when we see this, I think the conclusion is inescapable that this is Jesus Christ who showed up with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego for the purposes of saving them. And that is what Jesus always does, by the way. His mission is our salvation. And so it is only fitting that showing up in the Old Testament, his mission was the salvation of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Even here, appearance of the 4th is like the son of gods. Any discussion on this thus far? Because this is sort of the nexus and the climax of our text. Yeah. Yeah.
When the kids act up and you were asking for it, and that's what when he basically told them when you get what you would have said.
Yeah.
He basically was telling them you asking for it.
Certainly. Yeah, absolutely. Wrap up this discussion. I think that, what's that?
I'm saying that.
Oh, I know, the names are tough. The names here.
And I wrote it the way it's sounded.
Yeah.
Looking at the wording.
Yeah. Well, so like the CH sound, that's sort of a hard K sound in a way. And so, well, in Shadrach, Shadrach, as in shush, Shadrach, Meshach, Abendego, absolutely. Yeah, and again, by way of reminder, these were the names that were given to them by their captors. They were originally had the names Hananiah, I can't remember, Azariah and Malchiel, something like that. Yeah, well, they all are. And if you look in the original Hebrew here, too, the ch sound that you see at the end is a very common letter called the chesed. The chesed was one of the letters. That's a very common way to end words. So if you were to pronounce this as the Hebrews would, it would be something like Shadrach, Meshach, and sort of that the guttural sound. When I learned Hebrew, we had to make those noises, and it sounded like a bunch of cats hissing in the classroom. We're going to take a look at verse 26. Shirley, would you please take verses 26 through 26 and 27 here?
26 and 27.
Yes, ma'am.
Then, say his name one time.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace, who declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, came out and came here.
Come out and come here.
Come out and come here. Then Shadrach, then the three men.
Fair enough. Go ahead. Continue. Yeah.
They came out from the fire. And
Satraps,
and the satraps,
prefects,
the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their head was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them.
Thank you very much, and we'll pause there.
Now that's something.
The fourth man in that fiery furnace, the one with the appearance like the sons of the gods.
Who the fourth man?
The fourth man, who we identify as the pre-incarnate Christ, Jesus Christ himself, showing up on the scene, did what he always does. The mission of Christ is to save his people. He was doing that just here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they foretold this. They said earlier on, it's going to be our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, and so he did. The mission of God is to save his people. And God was at work doing just that.
And back in verse
Yeah.
25,
Yes.
he answered and said, as he four men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt,
Yes.
and pierced of the fourth is like the Son of the God.
Absolutely. And that is Jesus showing up here. That is Jesus. And the pre-incarnate Christ. The series, by the way, that we're doing is Jesus in the Old Testament, seeing where Christ shows up in the Old Testament before the incarnation and before his birth in Bethlehem. Not a hair, the hair of their heads was not singed. If I'm even lighting a match to light the candles in church, I might get a couple of hairs here singed, something like that. Hair of their head was not singed. Their cloaks were not harmed. No smell of fire had ever come on them. If you've even been around a campfire, sitting far back from a campfire, you're going to smell like the smoke from the campfire. Oh, yeah. Now, I love that smell of the smoke on the campfire. I'm like, I don't want to wash my clothes after this. This is just a pleasant aroma. But nonetheless, not even a cell of smoke was on them. And that is how Jesus works to save. When Jesus took up his cross, when Jesus mounted that cross, he did not do a half-baked job. He didn't save us to a point, and then we have to do the rest ourselves. He did it fully and completely so that none of the devil's fiery arrows can ever come upon us.
Amen. Yes.
So also with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. No harm was done to them. And
They believe in the true God.
yeah, because their faith in God, their faith going into that furnace, saying, our God's going to save us, but even if he doesn't, we're still not going to bow down to this false God. Their faith is what saved them. And so also our faith in the work of Christ and his holy cross is what saves us too. Look closely here at verse 26. Look at what Nebuchadnezzar says. I love this line. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. This draws my mind to the raising of Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus was in the same place that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was. That fiery furnace was to be their tomb. Lazarus was laying in the tomb. Jesus said with a loud voice, after they had rolled that stone away, he said, Lazarus, come out. And so he did, and he walked, and he was alive. The words of Nebuchadnezzar, the words of Jesus, are God's words to you this day. If you are walking in the land of death, unsure whether you are forgiven, come out. If you are wondering, if you are walking in a land of fear, if you are bound and captive to the fear and uncertainties and the worries of this world, come out. Come out and live. And live again and live anew, for you are saved totally and completely so that not even a hair on your head is singed. I'm going to read to the end here, starting at verse 28. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree. Any people, nation, or landward that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. And I'm going to read chapter 4, just a few verses, so we can see Nebuchadnezzar's about face. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation. Nebuchadnezzar had an about face here. From building a 90-foot tall statue of Bel or Marduk or himself, to singing the praises of his God. He's going to change. He's going to have another dream. He's going to fall and be humiliated and go back into his glory, and his kingdom will be conquered. But for this moment, the God who saved worked a change and a transformation in Nebuchadnezzar in his life. Let that same God work in your life to save you from the fiery furnaces that you may dwell in. Are there any questions or discussions as we wrap this up here? Yeah. I'm sorry?
He still was punished.
Oh yeah, no. Well, absolutely, and you note that well, that he is still a dictator and a despot, and that shows that his faith here is not genuine. He's all about power, and he now sees the God who saved Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as a way to power for himself, because he's still a bloodthirsty tyrant.
So after he saw all this,
Yeah.
he had them to everybody to praise them. Like
So whereas before he would see his gods, Bel and Marduk, as a means to serve him, so that he can be more powerful, he can be more bloodthirsty, he can be a dictator. He sees the power of God, of our God, of Yahweh, and yet he sees that power as a means to an end for himself. That he also would continue to be that powerful, despotic ruler and leader, but now he's on the good guy's side, whatever that means. Nebuchadnezzar is still a bad man and an evil man and a wicked man. He will get his comeuppance in a couple of chapters. We did that as a study a little bit ago. But for now and for this time, he's worshiping God. That's going to change, though, as we will see later on.